All right, we got our first redstone video. So today we're going to be building a redstone lamp timer. I'm using it to time and test horses, but you could use it for a bunch of different things. Anything you really need to time in game. Yeah. I was messing around with horses in my survival world, and I realized I needed to, I wanted to test their speed and whatnot. And it's hard to compare sometimes, especially when they're all like around the same. So I wanted to do some kind of timer, but a lot of the ones I saw didn't have a nice display. So that was kind of my goal of building this, and I think it turned out decently. It definitely could be compacted. I'm no expert. I'm decent at redstone, but definitely could be compacted or maybe just work a little better. But I think it does the trick. Yeah. So I'll show you guys what it does, and I'll have a tutorial later. So let's hop on this. This guy's kind of fast, pretty average. Basically, press the button, gives you a little countdown with the timer, and the gates open, and you should be already holding sprint and forward, and then you run to the end. And when you get here, it will stop the lamps, and that's your score. I have this big wall, and I have each of these little pillars to just mark out 5, but you could do anything on this wall. You could have banners with the numbers. You could do a bunch of stuff. So this score would be 5, 10, 15, 17. Not too bad, pretty average. So once you're done, you've written down your score or just taken a mental note. You then come and you reset it. This will clear all the lamps. It'll also reset all the redstone in the back in case you didn't finish or anything like that. You never know what will happen. And then once you hear that piston go off or all the lights go off, you are all set to press the buttons again and start another one. So I chose to do 35 red lamps from starting at the gate to the tripwire, but you can make it shorter or longer. It would be pretty easy to make it shorter, but longer, you might have to add a few things, just more circuits to power these, but it wouldn't be anything too crazy, especially if you know a little bit about redstone. I'm sure wouldn't be too hard to figure that out, but making it shorter should really just build less of it. Alright, so these are the materials needed to build this redstone lamp timer. The repeaters and the redstone dust are kind of just a bit of an estimate. You probably have a couple extra, but the rest of them pretty exact. You're gonna need a bunch of building blocks, whatever you want to use. They should be solid blocks. Then you need one slab or transparent block. And then for this glowstone, it's really whatever you want the note block to sound like. So whatever you put under the note block, it'll alter the sound to a different instrument. So I like the glowstone, but if you want to use something else, that works too. So to start building this thing, you want to build the track. That's the most important thing. Like I said, I did 35 blocks starting from the gate being block 1, and block 35 was the tripwire. I would recommend you make the sides at least 2 high, and probably you don't want just fences because then the horse might get stuck on this stone brick. But whatever works, doesn't really matter what block it is. I would just recommend keeping them in. You can make this back wider. You can make it as thin as 2 blocks, but I think 4 blocks wide is a good size for it. Okay, so the next thing to decide once you have your track in is where you're going to put your redstone lamps and your wall. I mean, it doesn't really need to be a wall, but whatever it ends up being. Mine is 4 blocks up from the track and 2 blocks over, but it doesn't really matter. A couple blocks either way, up, down, farther back won't really hurt. Okay, let's get started on the redstone. So let's get right underneath these gates. We want these andesite blocks right here. These guys all have to be solid blocks, and we're going to put some torches beneath them. We're going to put repeater going into those blocks, and then we're going to put torches behind the repeaters with a line of redstone connecting down to this note block. It doesn't have to be perfectly like this, but well, these things need to be perfect, but this redstone dust just needs to connect down here, and we'll worry about this in a second. Okay, so once we're here, the next thing to do is the note blocks. These don't have to be perfect. I kind of like to put them right underneath the gates. That way they're easiest to hear, but you do have to be careful because there can't be blocks on top of them. Otherwise they don't make sounds. So kind of offset them one here. Yep. I have them in a little square with 2 blocks in between. make sure all the repeaters are going this way towards where we just built. And we're gonna run, this doesn't have to be perfect, but somewhere over here, leave a gap. We want to put up a solid block. We'll worry about the piston later, and a repeater going into it, and then connect this to your buttons and make sure that your buttons aren't too far. Like if your button is a little farther away, you might need a repeater on the way here. But okay, we are going to then run over to the end. End is a lot simpler. You got your tripwire, 2 string, make sure they're connected. And then we need a slab. Right, these don't all have to be slabs, but this corner block has to be a slab because the tripwire is on this block right here. So we want to power that, and we also want to power down. So you can just run a couple blocks out for now, power that, and then we're going to put this down, right down to this note block. I have this on 20 clicks, doesn't really matter. Whatever works for you. Make sure that's get powered, and again, glowstone underneath it, but it doesn't have to be glowstone, that's your preference. The next step is to add the redstone to the lamps. I'm not actually at the proper lamps. I just got some little modules just to show you. So we have this orange circuit, magenta circuit, and a blue circuit. The blue circuit is the input, and the magenta is the bottom, the orange is the top. All they really do is they power every other redstone lamp, and that way we power all of them with the 2 different circuits. So this one, not too hard. This first repeater doesn't need to be on full ticks, but the other ones after do. It's just a repeater block. Underneath each block, you have a redstone dust, and it's important that there's a solid block next to the redstone dust and in between the lamp. This has to be on cross form and not like this, otherwise it won't power that. So you gotta just make sure they're all on cross form. Yeah, and then underneath, similar thing, where we run the input also down to here. Now, on every one, so this block powers the redstone lamps, and then we want to be powering this redstone lamp as well. So we have to have a piece of redstone dust powering this block, which will get them. So this does need to be a full block. I probably should have mentioned that before, but no worries. So then it's very similar, just repeater and all the way across. This doesn't need to be, should be on full. Then the next step, once you have this in for the entire row of lamps, it needs to go all the way down right here. I mean, if you're worried you didn't get them all, maybe just do one more to be safe, but you shouldn't have to. Yeah. So then the next step, I don't need all this anymore. Next step, we're adding this yellow circuit, which honestly is really simple. We're just putting a repeater into every repeater we placed, both on the top and the bottom. And then they're coming out, and it's just going to be a line of dust. The reason there's a block here is because it runs out of power right here, at least for the distance I have it set up. If you're making it shorter, you won't have any problem. You won't need that block. If you're making it longer, you're going to have to find a better way to power all these, but it shouldn't be too hard. Yeah, so basically you're just going to take these every time there's a repeater, you're going to throw a repeater on 1 tick in there, and just going to connect all these like so. Same thing with this on the bottom. Okay, so at this point you should have the yellow, the orange, and the magenta all set up, and we're going to move on to this gray circuit. Yeah, this guy can kind of be anywhere along the back, but I think it makes the most sense to just put him towards the finish. Here's the circuit. I'll kind of hover on it so you guys can copy it, but it's this redstone dust. We got a repeater going into that, 2 torches, and this just allows us to, if anything powers this side, it stays powered, and then if anything powers this side, that unpowers and this stays powered. We can skip the piston for now. You want to connect this gray up to where we left the tripwire last time, and probably put a repeater right around here just to make sure that signal gets there. Before we get to the circuit, we're going to pull out this signal with a redstone repeater, and we're going to put a solid block, going into a solid block. And then from this solid block, we want to take redstone dust trail, and we're going to connect it to the middle of the yellow top and the middle of the yellow bottom. You do have to put 2 like this if you're building a 35 long, just so that it gets all the way to the end with no delays. It wouldn't be the end of the world if there was a slight delay, but just for neatness. Yeah, and then after that, we have some connecting circuits. So we've got this blue one, which we're going to take out from the side of the block. Make sure there's a repeater here. And we're going to go give it a little space, and we're going to go all the way back, spacing from 12 to 15 redstone. That way we make sure we get the redstone powered. But we also don't want to use too many repeaters just to take up too much time. Yep. All these repeaters are on 1 tick if they're used down here. Actually, this one should be on 1 tick. I don't know why that's on 4 ticks. Yeah. Hope I didn't just break anything. So this blue one comes and it connects to the top, and you make sure it connects to the bottom. It just has to power this block. That way it can power both lanes, and we will get power to all our light sources. The next circuit after that is this white circuit. So we are going to come right down here to our initial start with the note blocks. We're going to pull a power signal right off this corner, give it a repeater to go, and we're sending this all the way down. It'll probably take you a couple of repeaters. We want to make sure we put it into the back of this block so this stays straight. Otherwise, this will not work properly. Exactly. So once you have all that in, you have everything but the red in at this point. So the red circuit is our reset circuit. I think it makes sense to start with the button. So somewhere over near your start, you probably want a button. You could put it at the end, whatever works best for you. But I think near the start, that way when you're ready to go, you press it. I mean, you could even have 2 inputs if you want to just run another line. But the right from the button, we're going to have a repeater. You can move this circuit back as long as there's a repeater going right into this dust. So we have a repeater going to a dust, another dust, and we have 5 comparators in this fashion. Make sure they're facing the right way. These 2 blocks and another dust. We make sure that these are blocks, solid blocks. Otherwise the timing, if you put like dust here instead, the timing of the system would be off. We're going to take that power directly out of this dust and do what we've been doing. We'll go down there in a second. And same thing here. We're going down. This line is going to run all the way to our gray line, and it's going to power it. Make sure that it gets here, and I'd probably put the repeater after it. And we're also going to take a little signal off our red line, and we're going to drop it right in here, going into a torch, which is going into an extended piston. And all this does, we want to make sure our piston is extended on this block so that when nothing's happening, that the power can go through here. And then when the reset goes through, we can't actually press the button and start. Otherwise it'd mess some stuff up. Yeah. And let's go to the other side of this reset line. So we're again coming from here. Make sure your repeater is right next to this dust. And we're running this all the way around. Got it inverted again. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter if you have it inverted or not, as long as by default the block is in the way of this repeater. Well, not in the way, but the block is allowing the signal through. And yeah, you can play around with this. It doesn't have to be just like this, but as long as that's working, that will also unpower both of these. It'll turn off all the yellow when you're resetting it, allowing all the lights to turn off. Yeah, so that was a tutorial on how to build it. My first one. Hope it went pretty well. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm not exactly sure how I would do linking like the world download, but if that's something people want, I can do that as well. Yeah, good luck in finding your horses, and I hope you have a good time. Or let me know if you think of any other uses for this redstone lamp timer. Yeah, have a good one.